"She's not coming back until Friday," my brother said, his hand flat against my front door like he owned it. He did not move. He did not apologize. He just stood there in the doorway of my own condo, blocking my view with his shoulder, speaking to me like I was a stranger who had knocked on the wrong unit. Behind him, I could see boxes. Dozens of them, stacked along the hallway I had painted myself last spring. I had taken an earlier flight. A 6-hour drive from Vancouver had turned into a 2-hour flight because my project wrapped 3 days ahead of schedule, and I had wanted nothing more than my own bed, my own kettle, my own silence. Instead, I was standing in the corridor of my building in Mississauga at 11 o'clock at night, carry-on bag at my feet, staring at my brother through the door of my own home. My brother looked at me for a long moment. Then he stepped back and let me in. The living room looked like a storage unit. My minimalist furniture had been pushed to the walls. My coffee table was buried under a pile of winter coats and a car seat. In the kitchen, my countertops were covered in someone else's appliances. A rice cooker I had never seen before sat on my good cutting board. There were 2 child-sized backpacks hanging from my coat hooks by the door. My sister-in-law came around the corner from the hallway. She was wearing a housecoat. She stopped when she saw me, and her expression shifted, not to guilt, but to mild inconvenience. Like I was a neighbor who had shown up at a bad time. "We thought you were in Vancouver until the weekend," she said. "I live here," I said. My brother cleared his throat. He crossed his arms the same way my father does before a lecture. "We had nowhere to go, Claire. The landlord sold the building. We got 30 days notice, and the rental market right now is impossible. Mom said you were away and this place was just sitting empty. Just sitting empty." My condo, which I had saved for through 4 years of remote work contracts and 1 brutal winter in Fort McMurray, was just sitting empty. "How long have you been here?" I asked. 10 days, my sister-in-law said. She had the tone of someone who had already rehearsed this conversation and decided in advance that she was the reasonable one. 10 days. They had been living in my home for 10 days while I was in Vancouver, presenting quarterly data to a client who paid me enough to afford this place. My brother had a key. The emergency key I had left with my mother 2 years ago for the one time my heat stopped working in January and I needed someone to let the building technician in. Somewhere between then and now, that key had changed hands. "You need to find somewhere else," I said. My sister-in-law's face changed. She reached back into the hallway and a moment later my nephew appeared, 4 years old, holding a stuffed dog and rubbing his eye with his fist. She positioned him beside her with one hand on his shoulder. "He just got settled," she said quietly. "He finally stopped asking why we had to leave our old place. Do you know how long that took?" There it was, the child, placed between me and the argument like a shield. My brother leaned against the wall. His voice dropped, the way it does when he wants to sound reasonable. "It is just temporary, Claire. Give us until the end of the month to find something. 6 weeks, maybe 8. You can stay at Daniel's." Daniel was my boyfriend. My brother knew we had broken up 4 months ago because I had told our mother, and our mother tells everyone everything. He knew I had no one to stay with. He was counting on that. "I am not staying at Daniel's," I said. "Then stay at a hotel. We will pay for it." He said this, knowing full well that hotels in Mississauga near my office ran $220 a night, and that I had a mortgage. He was offering optics, not money. My sister-in-law was already steering my nephew back down the hall, his small feet padding on my hardwood floors. "He needs to sleep," she said over her shoulder. "We can talk in the morning." And just like that, the conversation was over. My brother turned to the kitchen. My sister-in-law disappeared into what I realized with a cold drop in my stomach was my bedroom. My bedroom. I stood alone in my living room, surrounded by other people's boxes, in the home that had my name on the mortgage and no one else's. I picked up my carry-on. I walked out the front door. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes with the engine off. I had always been the one in this family who held things together. The one who got the scholarship, finished the degree, landed the contracts, bought the place. My brother had a good heart and bad luck, and for most of our lives I had believed those 2 things canceled each other out. I had fronted him money twice. I had co-signed a car loan he paid off late. I had told myself that family takes care of family, and I had believed it so completely that I handed my mother a spare key without a second thought. What I understood sitting in that parking garage, in the fluorescent quiet, was that I had confused love with availability. I had made myself so reliably, so quietly available, that I had become a utility. Not a person, a resource. They were not asking for help. They had installed themselves. And they were betting that my love for my nephew, and my discomfort with confrontation, would be enough to keep me from taking back what was mine. I drove to the Marriott on Ontario. I got a room on the 7th floor with a desk and a window that looked out over the highway. I opened my laptop. I did not go to sleep for a long time. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I had bought my condo in Ontario, which meant I was operating under the Residential Tenancies Act. The moment my brother and his family had moved personal belongings in and established residency, they had a potential claim to tenant protections. A standard eviction in Ontario could take 4 months minimum. The landlord and tenant board was backlogged. I had read enough Reddit threads from exhausted landlords to know that the legal clock was not on my side if this became a tenancy dispute. But there was a distinction that mattered. The RTA covers tenants who pay rent or have a rental agreement, written or implied. It did not automatically cover a family member who had entered under false pretense using a key given for emergency access. The question was whether 10 days of occupation had crossed a legal threshold. I called a housing lawyer the next morning, not a consultation service. An actual real estate and tenancy lawyer whose name had come up in a forum I trusted. I paid the $350 for an hour of her time, and I explained the situation clearly and without drama. She asked me 3 questions. Had I accepted any money from them? No. Had I communicated in writing that they could stay? No. Had I asked them to leave verbally? Yes, the previous night. She explained that because there was no rental agreement, no exchange of money, and documented verbal notice, I was in a stronger position than most people who called her with this kind of situation. She recommended I follow up the verbal notice with written notice delivered the same day, clearly stating that no tenancy had been established and that their presence constituted unauthorized occupation. She recommended I do this by text and by email, so there was a timestamp on both. Then she said something I wrote down word for word. She said that the most effective thing I could do was document everything from this point forward, make clear that no consent had ever been given in writing, and use the tools I had available to make the property uncomfortable to occupy, without creating any situation that could be characterized as harassment. I thanked her. I sent the written notice by text and email at 11:47 that morning. My brother did not respond. My sister-in-law sent back a single line. "We have nowhere to go. Please don't do this to the kids." I saved it. I saved everything. That afternoon I went back to the condo while my brother was out. My sister-in-law opened the door. She looked at me with the careful expression of someone who has decided to manage rather than argue. "I want to help you," I said. And I meant it. Not the way she thought I meant it, but I meant it. "We just need time," she said. "I understand that, and I think I have a way to make this work for everyone." I stepped inside. I set my bag on the kitchen counter, the one currently occupied by a rice cooker and someone else's dish rack. The problem is that 5 people cannot live in a 1-bedroom condo without some kind of formal arrangement. My condo insurance does not cover unauthorized occupants. If something happens to one of the kids, I am liable. She frowned. Nothing is going to happen. My insurance company does not know that. But here is the thing. If we formalize this, I can add you as temporary occupants for insurance purposes. I can also cover your transit costs as a family expense, which gives me a small tax write-off. It just has to be documented properly. My brother had come back. He was standing in the hallway with his jacket still on, listening. "What does that mean?" he asked. "Documented how?" "A temporary occupancy agreement. It is basically just a piece of paper that says you are here with my consent. For a specific period. Under specific terms. It protects you too. Actually, if anything goes wrong with the building, a flood, a fire, you're covered as occupants, rather than having no legal status at all." My sister-in-law looked at my brother. He pulled off his jacket slowly. "How long would it say?" he asked. 60 days, I said. "More than enough time to find something. And in the meantime, you have legal standing in the unit. Which means the building management cannot remove you without going through me." That last part was what sold it. They had been worried, I could tell, about building management. My brother nodded. My sister-in-law asked if the kids' names needed to be on it. "No," I said. "Just the 2 of you as adult occupants. Standard stuff." I sat at my kitchen island, which now had a crayon mark along the edge, and I opened the document I had spent most of the previous night drafting with the help of the lawyer's advice and my own careful reading of the RTA. I was not writing a rental agreement. A rental agreement would grant them full tenant protections, trigger the RTA, and hand them 4 months of legal buffer and a queue at the LTB. I was writing a temporary occupancy license. The legal distinction in Ontario is real, and it matters. A license grants permission to occupy without conferring property rights. It is revocable. It does not create a landlord-tenant relationship. It is the difference between a guest at a hotel and a renter with a lease. A hotel can ask you to leave. A landlord cannot. The document had 12 clauses. Most of them were standard and visible. Clause 3 confirmed that no rent was being paid and therefore no tenancy was being established under the RTA. Clause 5 stated that the license was personal and non-transferable. Clause 7 confirmed that the occupants had no right to add additional persons or change any fixtures. The ones that mattered were buried in the middle, written in the same plain font as everything else. Clause 8. The occupancy license was contingent on the property remaining available as the licensor's primary residence and could be revoked at any time upon 24 hours' notice. Clause 10. Occupants consented to the licensor's existing building security system and acknowledged that common areas, including the kitchen, living room and entryway, were equipped with security monitoring for the licensor's insurance compliance purposes. Clause 11. Occupants agreed to conduct a background and credit verification as a condition of the licensor's condo insurance bonding requirements. I printed it from my wireless printer, which they had not unplugged. I set it on the counter with 2 pens. My brother read it the way people read phone terms of service. His eyes moved, but they were not landing anywhere in particular. He was looking for the length of stay and the part about the kids being covered. 60 days from today, he said, tapping the date on page 1. Exactly, I said. And this doesn't cost us anything. Not $1. My sister-in-law had already picked up her pen. She signed on the line before my brother did. He followed a moment later. I signed my own name. I thanked them. I told them I had a client call, and I would be out of their way for a few hours. I drove back to the Marriott. I opened my laptop and pulled up the security app connected to the 2 cameras I had installed the previous year after a package theft in the building. One covering the front door and entryway, one covering the kitchen counter area where the parcel shelf sat. Both were on my home network. Both were recording. Within 40 minutes of leaving, my sister-in-law was on the phone. I turned up the audio. The call lasted 11 minutes. I caught enough. She told someone her mother, from the context, that I had given them 2 months. And they were not planning to leave after that either, that I was a pushover, that the condo was too good to give up, and that I spent most of my time traveling for work anyway, that they would deal with it when the 60 days were up. Her exact words were, "She signed the paper. We're fine." She was not wrong that I had signed the paper. She was very wrong about what the paper meant. I opened the background check I had legally ordered under Clause 11. My brother's credit report was not surprising. 2 missed payments on a line of credit, a collections flag from a cell phone provider. Standard financial stress, nothing unusual. My sister-in-law's report was different. There were 3 previous addresses in the last 4 years. All 3 showed up in a landlord registry I had paid $30 to access. 2 formal N4 notices for non-payment of rent in Ontario. 1 application to the LTB by a previous landlord that had been settled. And a civil judgment from 2022 for $4,800 in unpaid rent and property damage, filed by a numbered company in Brampton. She had not just been evicted. She had been flagged, and she knew it. That was why she had been willing to move into a family member's home on 10 days' notice. That was why she had not pushed back on any clause in the document. She was not looking for temporary housing. She was looking for a place that would not run her name. My condo was not a safe harbor. It was a hiding spot. I took a long breath. I ordered room service. I watched the camera feed on my second monitor while I ate. That evening, my nephew drew on my hallway wall with a marker. I watched it happen in real time on the screen. My sister-in-law saw it, said his name twice, and then went back to her phone. My brother smoked on my balcony. My building was a non-smoking property. The lease I had signed with the Condo Corporation when I first bought the unit was explicit. I had the clause number memorized from the day I moved in because the smell of the previous owner's tobacco had taken 3 weeks and 2 cans of primer to cover. I documented the smoking. I documented the wall. I documented the phone call. The next morning I sent my brother a text. It said, "As noted in Clause 8 of the occupancy license, I am providing 24 hours notice of license revocation effective tomorrow at 10 a.m. This is not a request for negotiation. Please arrange for your family and belongings to be removed by that time. If you need help coordinating a moving truck, I am happy to help cover the cost." He called me 4 times. I did not answer. My sister-in-law sent a message saying I could not do this. That they had a signed agreement. That she knew her rights. I replied with a single sentence, "Please review Clause 3 and Clause 8 of the document you signed." My mother called that evening. Her voice had the particular texture it gets when she has been recruited. She told me I was being cruel. She told me my nephew had been through enough. She asked me how I could do this to my own family. I told her calmly that I had given written notice, that no tenancy existed under the RTA, and that I had documented multiple violations of the occupancy agreement, including smoking on a non-smoking property. I told her I was happy to discuss the situation after my brother's family had vacated the unit. She told me I had always been too focused on myself. I said, "I love you. I will call you next week. And I hung up. The following morning at 10:15, when no one had left and no one had responded to my final check-in message, I revoked the license formally by email with a read receipt. I contacted my building management office and notified them in writing that I had unauthorized occupants in my unit, that I had followed the correct license revocation process, and that I was requesting their support in facilitating access to my property. Building management sent a letter within the hour. A physical letter slid under the door, which I know because I watched it happen on camera. The building superintendent explained that the unit was registered to a sole occupant, that no occupancy transfer or subletting had been filed with the Condo Corporation, and that unauthorized occupants were in breach of the building's rules and the Condo Declaration. That letter mattered. It made clear to my brother and his wife that this was no longer just between me and them. The building was involved. The Condo Corporation had standing, and unlike the LTB, the Condo Corporation's compliance process did not take 4 months. At noon, I forwarded the civil judgment I had found on my sister-in-law's record to her email address with a short note. I want to be clear that I am aware of the judgment filed against you in 2022 and the LTB applications at your previous 2 addresses. I am not using this as a threat. I am letting you know so that you understand the full picture of what you signed and what your options are. I am still prepared to help with the cost of a moving truck. 20 minutes later, my sister-in-law replied. The tone was completely different. She asked if the offer for the moving truck was real. I said yes. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, they were loading boxes into a truck my brother had borrowed from a friend. I did not go to the condo. I watched on the camera feed from my hotel room, drinking tea and answering emails. My nephew walked down the hall with his stuffed dog under his arm. I felt something sharp in my chest watching him, and I did not try to talk myself out of it. He was 4 years old and none of this was his fault, and I was still the one who had been right. My brother sent me a text at 5:47. It said, I hope you're happy. I thought about it for a while before I responded. I thought about the car loan and the 2 transfers and the spare key I had given in good faith, and the 11-minute phone call I had listened to in a hotel room in Mississauga while eating a club sandwich. I wrote back, I hope you find a good place quickly. I mean that. He did not respond. I went back to my condo at 7 that evening. The building superintendent met me at the elevator and walked with me to my door, which was standard protocol after a documented occupancy dispute. I used my app to reset the lock code before I even stepped inside. The unit was not destroyed. It was messy, and it smelled like other people. And there was a marker line on my hallway wall at exactly the height a 4-year-old could reach. But it was not destroyed. The rice cooker was gone. The backpacks were gone. Someone had stacked my books back on the shelf in the wrong order. I stood in the middle of my living room in the quiet. My kettle was still on the counter. My throw blanket was still on my chair. The windows still faced west, and the light was still coming in at the angle I had bought the unit for. I ran a bath. I made tea. I sat on my own couch in my own silence and I thought about what my lawyer had said on the phone. Use the tools you have available. The tools I had were not power or money or confrontation. They were documentation, patience, and the willingness to do the thing no one expected me to do, which was to stay calm and take it seriously from the very first moment. Every person who had ever moved through my life, assuming I would absorb their chaos, had counted on one thing, that I valued keeping the peace more than I valued keeping what was mine. They were wrong about that. They had always been wrong about that. It had just taken me long enough to stop proving them right. A week later, I changed the emergency contact on file with the building from my mother to my friend Priya, who lived 2 floors down and had no opinion on family dynamics. I did not tell my mother. I just did it. I also scheduled a consultation with an estate lawyer to have a formal property access protocol drafted, something clean and written and signed by anyone who ever held a key to anything I owned. Priya thought this was excessive. I thought it was the most reasonable thing I had ever done. My brother found a place in Hamilton 6 weeks later. My mother told me about it on a Sunday call. She mentioned it the same way she mentions weather. Casually. Without looking directly at it. I said I was glad to hear it. She asked if I would be coming home for Thanksgiving. I said I was thinking about it. I did go. I sat at the table and I passed the potatoes, and I talked to my nephew about his new school, and he showed me a drawing he had done of a dog that looked like it might also be a horse. I kept it. I put it on my fridge when I got home. Some things do not resolve cleanly. Some things just shift, settle, and become the new shape of what was always already true. My brother and I are not close the way we used to be. We are polite and infrequent, and occasionally, if the situation is right, something almost like warmth passes between us and I. Recognize it for what it is. The memory of who we were before either of us understood what we each expected of the other. What I keep from all of it is not the satisfaction of having won, because it did not feel like winning. It felt like maintenance. Like fixing a structural problem that had been there for years and would have eventually brought the whole thing down if I had not dealt with it properly. The most powerful thing I did was not the lawyer, not the document, not the camera feed. The most powerful thing I did was decide, sitting in a parking garage in the dark, that my own name on a mortgage meant something. That I was allowed to mean it. That took no strategy at all. That was just deciding to take myself seriously. And I had been a long time getting there.